Hello. As Deborah said, you might know me from being behind the coffee bar, and those of you on the live stream might know me as the person who replies to your comments. I've worked at the Abbey for about 2 years now, but the first time I ever went to a service at the Abbey was actually in 2018. So the first service I ever attended at the Abbey was a Pride service, just like this one. It was my first time stepping inside a church for almost 7 years. There was a guest speaker that day, standing where I'm standing right now, and he stood in front of all of you, and he talked about being gay. And nobody gasped. No one started whispering or laughing or yelling. No one said they would pray for him. No one reacted much at all, just quietly listening, sipping their coffee, acting like everything was totally normal while I cried next to a stranger. I will never forget the hospitality I experienced at the Abbey that day. I came here all alone with shaky hands. I came in knowing it was a Pride celebration, knowing that it was okay for me to be here with my buzz cut and my rainbow pins and my men's button-up shirt, but still not really trusting, not really believing this place was real. I sat down next to a stranger, one of the only empty seats left, and I quietly sniffled the whole service. I don't remember this stranger's name or what she looked like or really anything about her. But I remember she offered me a tissue halfway through and looked away to not draw attention to my tears. I remember when I reached for my wallet as the offering basket came around, she batted my hand away and said, "No, you're our guest today." I remember everyone standing for communion while I stayed frozen in my seat, unsure if I should take it, if I deserved it, if I belonged. She stood up, turned to me, offered her hand, and said, "Go ahead. You can take it if you want to. I'll be right behind you." When I was a young, shy preteen, I loved church. My family didn't go on Sundays, but on Wednesdays, I carpooled with 2 neighborhood friends and their mom to youth group. Each Wednesday, she dropped us off 30 minutes early so we could gossip and giggle with the other middle school kids on the front lawn. And at 7 p.m., we'd go inside and sit in a circle around a 20-something-year-old woman who I thought was maybe the coolest person alive. Our youth group leader was so cool. She had dyed hair, and she wore band t-shirts, and she had a nose piercing. And I was in love with her. I was downright studious in youth group, always participating, wanting to impress her. Nursing one of my very first crushes on a girl, I leapt into discussion, ready to talk about the topic of the week. One week, the topic was homosexuality. I fell silent, my heart beating out of my chest, as this young woman who I admired told me that the innermost thoughts that I had only shared in the pages of a journal were wrong. I stared at my shoelaces for an hour and tried not to listen to her telling us that it was a temptation to be resisted, an illness to be cured, something dirty or sick or wrong, that people like me needed to be saved or fixed. When the lesson was over and everyone started to walk back outside to chatter on the lawn, I stood slowly, my legs turning to jelly, my stomach feeling it had been flipped upside down. She laid a hand on my shoulder while I looked straight forward and told me that she noticed my silence, that it was okay, it wasn't my fault. There was a place I could go, she said, a place the church could send me to be cured, to be fixed, to be saved. I got into my friend's mom's car, and when she called the next week to ask if she should pick me up for youth group, I said no. And I said no again the next week, and the next, until eventually she stopped calling. There are moments I look back on my life now as a queer adult who was once certain that I wouldn't grow up. At 13, I was sure I had no future. I couldn't picture it, couldn't picture myself 24 and queer and happy. For many years, I cried on my birthday, having previously believed I could never be that age. I couldn't fathom the idea of an adult queer life. I couldn't fathom living with the pain for another year longer. Each birthday, I would stand in the mirror, shocked to see myself another year older. Last year was the first birthday I didn't cry. Many people fear that we are going backwards, that the queer youth of today will have fewer rights or a worse quality of life than the generation before them. This fear is valid. 497 anti-trans bills were introduced in the US this year. The passage of LB 574 here in Nebraska has been a huge blow in the lives of trans children and their families. It can feel hopeless and heartbreaking, but as activist Mariam Kamba has said, let this radicalize you rather than lead you to despair. This is where we come in. This is where we put that radical hospitality I spoke of earlier into action. This is the time for welcoming community into your life, for driving people across state lines to receive medical care, for fundraising for families who need to get out of the state, for cooking your queer friends a meal, offering a listening ear, and not offering a single cliche in return, for holding your friends' hands, for calling your senators, or showing up at their office, or showing up at their house, and demanding that we need to be heard. Now is the time to be relentless, to make good trouble, to, as Bayard Rustin once said, become angelic troublemakers and tuck yourself in places so wheels don't turn. Every fight our queer ancestors won before us, we won with way less help than we have now. We are not going backwards just because we temporarily lost a few legislative fights. This is not the end of the fight. This is the beginning. Coretta Scott King once said, "Progress is never truly won. It is fought and earned in every generation." This is our generation's fight, and we need you in the fight now more than ever. And if there are any young, frightened queer people listening to me right now, anyone who looks in the mirror on their birthday and wonders how they got here and if they'll make it to the next one, any queer kid looking out into the impossibility of living a free and happy adult queer life, I just want to say, go ahead. You can take it if you want to. I'll be right behind you.
So, as you may know, my name is Jasmine. I've worked here we established last service like 5 years, going on 6. And I do the social media and filming for church, which Leslie's taking over. Shout out, Leslie. So this is my 3rd time talking about Pride. And this time I really had to kind of dig for some inspiration. I think it's safe to say it's been a hard year. I feel like I say that every year, but it doesn't get less true. And I've come to realize that joy is a skill, something we work at, something we grow over time. When things are difficult, and I mean really difficult, I mean crying on the sidewalk in front of the Urban Abbey difficult, I mean feeling like I'm going to throw up every weekend, at work difficult. It is these times of anxiety and frustration and guilt that is when it feels like it's really important to focus on joy. Pride has always felt like a solace to me, that I can turn to community and feel safe and happy to be part of something bigger than myself, something that took hard work from so many people to make happen. But even that this year feels kind of hollow. The reality is that the LGBT community has suffered from so much loss. It feels like I am perpetually grieving as transgender rights are stripped away all over the country, as the state of Florida becomes a veritable no-fly zone for gender nonconforming people, as the Supreme Court rules that people like me can be turned away and refuse service for the crime of being different, for being gay or transgender or queer. And it can be a really hard pill to swallow. And I ask myself, how do we find joy in all of this? How do we have faith? What am I trying to believe in? And I find my answer here. It always comes back to this, back to community, back to the people around me. I remember after the first threat came, Deborah had all of us on staff sit down and we talked about what we were going to do next. She asked if we should keep hosting Drag Story Hour, that she would understand if we were all too scared or if we wanted to leave. And I knew immediately that I wasn't, and I didn't. And then I looked around the table to all of my coworkers. Up to that point, we had all felt some level of uncertainty. We weren't sure if the threats against us were real. We weren't sure what we would do if they were. I wasn't even really sure if it was all real or if I was just having some really insane dream. But I looked around that table and saw everyone else come to the same conclusion, that it didn't make us want to leave and it didn't make us too scared to continue. What we needed then wasn't a way out, but a path forward, a plan of action, the next steps. And that is the mentality I find myself falling back on when it feels like it's all too much, when it feels hopeless and impossible, when every hurdle becomes a mountain and every loss becomes an ocean. That I don't want to leave, and I'm not too scared to keep going. That I don't want out, I want in. The queer community has confronted this hatred before, and we will again. And it is joy, I think, that keeps us going. It's love and community and family that we fold in our pockets and we keep close to our hearts. And that's how we forge a path forward. This is how we continue to pursue equality. We gather our strength through unity. To quote Audre Lorde, "When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid." And that's what it comes down to. It's not that I'm fearless, it's that I'm finding the strength to move forward anyways. And I am never alone in this. And that is what Pride shows us, again and again. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so honored to have even been asked to be here today to speak with you. I brought two of my kids, Della and Hattie, back there. And they walked in the Pride Parade with me yesterday with our float, "Don't legislate hate." A mantra that I had this year, "Don't legislate hate." And yesterday was really beautiful. And I've walked in the Pride Parade several times. I think one of the only times in the last several years that I missed was when there was that big storm and the trees fell down, and people still showed out in force. I did not, because there were trees down in my neighborhood. But that's the only time that I think I've missed in recent years. And yesterday was really reaffirming that what happened in the Capitol this year does not define us. It does not define our state. It does not define our community. Yesterday defines us. The city of Omaha came out to say that you are loved and that you belong here and that we are going to wrap you in our love. And it doesn't matter what people that our politicians do or say, that doesn't change the hearts and the minds of the people in your community. That is just people being silly, being bananas, bologna Skittles, what have you. This year was hard. It was really hard. But as Gab said, it wasn't the beginning. It wasn't even close. And it wasn't the end either, not even close. They're going to keep coming. They're going to keep trying to legislate hate. And we are going to continue to wrap one another in love. Because they can't. They cannot take away that. They cannot take away our love. They cannot take away our compassion. They cannot take away our kindness. They can tell us that we shouldn't call people birthing parents or birthing people. We should call them women. And kindness costs you nothing. Compassion costs you nothing. So I'm going to keep saying birthing people, because that is what kindness looks like. And we just have to keep on keeping on saying, this isn't okay. You need to learn yourselves. You need to expand. We need to meet that hatred with kindness and compassion. And there are days where that's really hard to do. And not everyone gets to live out their hard days so publicly as I do, but I had them. I had hard days, but I mostly had good days because I had some really amazing people by my side. I had Megan Hunt, of course, who's just a goddess, and Jen Day, and George Dungan, and Danielle Conrad, and John Fredrickson, and this really great guy. His name's John Kavanaugh. I had this great community of people, and they constantly reminded me about the community outside of that chamber, and that chamber wasn't who we were, and that it was important to just get up every day. And some days I did not want to get up, but I got up every day. I put on my Skechers. I stood on an anti-fatigue mat, lost my voice sometimes, but I kept getting up and showing up, because that's what we need to do for each other. We need to show up, and everybody can show up in their own way. You don't have to show up the way I did. Show up in the way that's best for you. I do like to remind people, I'm just a mom. I got 3 kids, 2 of them are here. They play soccer. We go to soccer practice. We go to soccer games. I am literally a Nebraska soccer mom. There is nothing extraordinary about me. What I did is take the opportunity that was presented to me to use the power that I had. That's it. So take the opportunity that is presented to you to use the power that you have, to use your voice in whatever way works for you. But don't look at me and be like, that's extraordinary. This should be ordinary. This should be the expectation. The expectation for everyone should be that first and foremost, the people you elect to office should have integrity and should stand up for vulnerable people and should do it every day. That's our job. But also, you can do those things in your own lives. Part of that is showing up here and having a sense of community. But find ways to do it every day. There's always an opportunity to do something with your position and your power. I hope everyone here today and at home has hope for the future, because I have so much hope for the future. I know it is going to be challenging, and we are going to be faced with a lot of hardships, but hold on to yesterday, hold on to today, look around you and know that there's no giving up and there is no going back. And we will continue to fight for human rights, for civil rights, for parental rights. We're not going to stop, because they're not going to stop either. And they're on the wrong side of history, and we're on the right side. It's just going to be a little painful for a while, but we will get there. And I'll leave you with what I always like to leave people with, for anyone who needs to hear this. You are loved. You are worth fighting for, and I am never going to stop fighting for you. Thank you.